a new bicentennial-themed exhibition will explore 200 years of history, stories, and broader forces at play that culminated in the events of 1819. An old new world from the East Indies to the founding of Singapore, the 1600s to 1819. It will be opening on the 21st of September at the National Museum of Singapore.
And joining us with more information tonight is Daniel Tham, and he is curatorial lead at the museum. Daniel, thank you for coming in and speaking to us. So why is this exhibition titled An Old New World?
I'm glad you asked. This is an exhibition that, as you mentioned, is done in conjunction with the Singapore Bicentennial, and with all the attention being given to the 200 years from 1819 all the way to present day. We thought, as the National Museum, to bring the history back 200 years instead. So for this exhibition, we're looking at the 200 years leading up to 1819 instead. And that brings us back to the time when both the English and the Dutch East India Companies were first started, and when they first centered their attention on our region, what they referred to at that time as the East Indies. So a bit of a longer history, a bit of a broader geographical scope as well. And when we started looking at this longer history and broader scope, we felt that this was really characterized by a coming together of the worlds. From a European perspective, this was really a new world, a world that was out to be discovered, to be taken advantage of commercially as well. But we felt that it was very important to contrast that with the idea and a local perspective of this being an old world, that we have been around all this while anyway. We have been thriving economically and culturally for centuries, at the very least. And so what you see in this exhibition is really a coming together of the worlds. And that's something that visitors can actually look forward to see once they enter the exhibition. We have a multimedia dramatization of the very first arrival of the English East India Company in our part of the world, and that's in Aceh. And one of the observations that the fleet made was that, hey, there were already at least 16 other ships present at the port. There was already a bustling trade taking place. And that's one of the things that we want our visitors to see and to appreciate, that our history goes much further back, and there's something rich to appreciate as well.
Yes. Well, I mean, anyone who studied some of the history of this region will know about the intense rivalry that there was between the Dutch and the British, and then before them, let's not forget the Portuguese, who were here well before that, right? So we had competition even between the port of Malacca and the port of Singapore, as an example. So how do some of the perspectives from this exhibition, how are they going to shed some light on how important Singapore became as a trading port, even until today?
We pick up the story just about at that turning point, at the start of the 17th century, when, as you pointed out, the Portuguese were still very much a dominant European power in this region. But the coming of the companies, the East India Companies, both the English and the Dutch, they came with very, very different resources. They had huge financial resources as joint stock companies. They had their own private armies as well. And very soon, I would say, displaced the Portuguese. You would see in a map that we show that actually shows and depicts a naval battle taking place just off the Changi coast in Singapore, between the Dutch and the Portuguese. And that was really a turning point in that sense.
Okay, so, with so much information that you're giving us, give us a little bit of an insight of what can we expect. You gave us a little bit of, when we enter, what we're going to see. But what more can our home viewers expect when the exhibition starts?
We have something for everyone, I would say. In terms of artifacts, we have a whole variety, more than 200 artifacts on display. A good number of that comes from our own national collection, which we have been building through the years. But also at the same time, we have international loans from museums, as well as private loans from families. So that's something that we can definitely look forward to seeing. One of the things that I'm quite excited to share would be what I believe to be the earliest natural history drawing done in Singapore. And that was deposited with the Natural History Museum in Paris by Alfred Duvassel, who was a French zoologist commissioned by Raffles. And when I was going through the collections of the library of the museum just earlier this year, I found one drawing that mentioned Singapore. So that's actually the very first time that this drawing is going to be displayed, and visitors can see that in the exhibition.
As you say, the British East India men, including Raffles, they were company men. They were sort of entrepreneurs. They were going to toe the line in a way, but they also wanted to find out what resources there were here. So the stories are so fascinating. When Raffles came out here, they found sea sponges and supposedly drank wine out of them and butchered dugongs and ate those. I know those sound terrible, but those are the fascinating stories that most of us have never heard. So is there a must-see exhibit in this exhibition?
Well, what you just mentioned is it's very interesting, because while like you mentioned, these company men ended up being credited for discovering and naming many of these species. What we explore in the exhibition really looks at how local knowledge was very important, how Raffles would have depended on a whole contingent of local runners to help him collect specimens, to help him make his way through the jungle interiors. So you would have on display, for example, the first publication of the Rafflesia. And from there, we start talking about what it means for something like that to be discovered. We often associate that with Raffles, and he did have a part to play in that, but it's also called the Rafflesia arnoldii, and that is named after his botanist, Joseph Arnold. And yet, at the same time, Arnold was alerted to this flower by his local assistant.
Yeah, they couldn't do all of this alone.
Definitely not.
Daniel, thank you very much for coming into the studios to tell us about this wonderful exhibition. It really does sound like there's something for everyone. We've been speaking there to Daniel Tham, curatorial lead at the museum for this new exhibition, An Old New World. It opens from this Saturday. National Museum.